what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And you just, okay, be explicit. This happens. Okay, well, if that happens, then what can you do? Could you go get a job? They're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, so.
The worst case. This is Dalton plus Michael, and today we're going to talk about how to spend your 20s. Yeah, we are, as people who are no longer in our 20s, we're qualified.
Extremely.
Extremely
We're people
qualified.
on the internet, man.
Yeah.
We have all the answers on how to live your life. That's how
We're
this works, right?
elder millennials. In all honesty, I think that we see a lot of young people at YC become really successful. And so there are some lessons that probably can be pulled out and that would apply to people who might not even ever want to do a startup. So where would you start?
How about here? Do you know what the hedonic treadmill is, friends? It's this thing where no matter what's going on in your life, you will get used to it.
Yes.
And so when you get a new cool thing, when you're a kid and you get a new toy, you're like, wow, this toy is awesome. What a great Christmas. I'll never want for anything again. And then 2 days later, you're like, oh yeah, this toy sucks.
It's just
like,
on the
I want
pile.
more new stuff.
Yes.
And so whenever you get new things, whenever you get new rewards, you get used to them and they no longer are awesome the way you thought they would be once you get them. Okay.
Yes.
And so the treadmill is you're always trying to walk forwards on achieving new goals or getting new stuff.
Yes.
And it never feels satisfying and you just keep running on the treadmill forever. Okay?
Well, and I think that there's some dangerous hedonic treadmills in your 20s. And what's funny is like Instagram kind of blew this up in a really awkward way because it's like everyone's sharing videos and photos of them living their absolute best life.
Yeah, it's fake. Like they're clipping the 0.01% of their lives that are awesome, and they're putting it on a site, and you're like, wow, everyone is living a more awesome life than me.
Like every day,
all the time. My life sucks.
Yes. and it changes kind of what you think your goals should be. So what's sad and unfortunate is that like there's only so many, I mean, wow, this is going to sound really depressing. There are only so many good things.
There's only so many toys.
Yeah.
And
life. This isn't a speed run to get through them. And you know, people who grew up super rich like have this problem of like, oh crap, like I already did all the fun stuff and I have a lot more life to live. Oh man, this sucks. So we definitely see people screw that up in their 20s.
And we are arguing that there is a way to hack this. There's a way to hack the hedonic treadmill.
It doesn't mean you shouldn't seek like enjoyment.
And the hack is to intentionally delay each step.
Yeah.
And to give yourself room and upside.
Yes.
So there's always more steps for you to climb in the future versus speed running it and getting it all at once.
Yes.
So for example, you gave this example.
Yep.
The first place you live after college should not be much nicer than your dorm room.
Yeah. Even if you got a job in Facebook and you can afford it.
and the reason is you're leaving yourself a lot more upside there.
Yes.
Your
first vacations should probably not be that nice.
Yep.
There are lots of examples. Your first car should probably not be that nice. I think this applies in so many areas. And I think that like if you can get those hedonic distractions a little bit out of your 20s, you can focus on other stuff. What should people be focusing on?
The best way I've heard this said is to do the most hardcore thing early in your career, because you can always mellow out. You can always pull the ripcord and do less hard things.
Yes.
It's very hard to go the other way around. Like if you've been on mellow, chill mode, and then you decide you want to be very ambitious and hardcore, much harder to do it that way.
Why do people, it's interesting to me because that seems obvious. That seems like obvious advice, but I also feel like people are like afraid of it somehow.
No, I think you're bombarded with, you want to have a good work-life balance. I think you're actually bombarded with like,
you might burn out.
The opposite of that.
Yeah.
Right?
It's weird.
I found these messages very confusing when I was younger.
Well, I might argue maybe I was just kind of in a weird bubble, but like I feel like I hear those messages now. I didn't hear those messages then. Like almost all of my friends were trying hard. But now it almost feels like, oh, if you try too hard, you'll pull a muscle.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. It's kind of like, oh, if you run too hard when you're young, you'll hurt yourself, versus like, you'll definitely hurt yourself when you're old and you run too hard. Like being young is when you actually.
How about to riff on it this way?
Yeah.
if you choose to go to med school, that is a hardcore thing. And once you get your MD, you could be a more mellow doctor. You don't have to be some heart crazy ER doc.
Yes.
You could be like a part-time plastic surgeon once you go through med school. So you're doing the hardcore thing early and you have like a lot of choices.
Yeah.
Same thing with law school, I would say. Same thing with people that work at hedge funds or investment banks.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people that opt into other careers do the less hardcore thing. And again, maybe they should. Maybe if you want to be a novelist, you should be a really hardcore novelist in your 20s and write a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think regardless of the career you're going down, the more hardcore path just gives you more optionality when you're older.
And I think this comes back to a point we talk about a lot, which is that like you don't really know your capacity.
Yep.
Don't speed run all the fancy things in life and do hard shit early. Get used to it. Get comfortable. I think the third thing that comes up a lot in your 20s is it's an opportunity to be risk seeking versus risk avoiding. And it's hard to contextualize how much of your life you'll spend being risk avoided.
Yep.
But it's like you have kids, you have a mortgage, you have elderly parents, you yourself are elderly, you are less willing to take risk. It's like most people in their 20s don't have any of those things to worry about, or many, I shouldn't even say most. Yet sometimes it seems like they're not taking as much risk.
Yeah.
What do you think's going on there?
From talking to founders, a lot of them are told by their parents to not do something risky and to not take career risk in their 20s.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not really sure exactly where that's coming from, but doing a startup is seen as risky, like you can destroy your life if you do a startup.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So I think it's fear. And again, perhaps justified. I don't really get it.
This is the thing that always gets me. It's not the idea that you get a job and you can do that job at that company for the rest of your life has already been disproven.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, I understand the feeling of fear, but like the result, like, oh, if I get a job at IBM today, like I go there until I'm 60, like probably not, sorry. And so I think the other thing that happens when people think about risk is they have to test themselves. It's hard to kind of know what you're made of. It's easy to like think you know what you're made of and never test it, than to actually be out there in an uncomfortable area and like have to put
I
up
think
a
one
show
good
up.
exercise you could do on that point, whenever people talk about risk or they're worried about it, is I encourage them to just be like, okay, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And you just, okay, be explicit. This happens. Okay, well, if that happens, then what can you do? Could you go get a job? They're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, so
The worst case.
like it's like I would advise this for everybody out there.
Yeah.
You know, talk through explicitly what the worst thing that could happen if you take a risk is.
Yeah.
And it might not sound as bad as you think once you name it, once you talk about it explicitly.
Well, and here's the interesting thing, because we're making this for general audience. I want to leave open the door that maybe it is really bad.
Yeah. Fair.
Right? Like, and if it really is bad,
don't take risk.
Don't take the risk. Like, we're not saying you should always, no matter what starting conditions, be risk seeking. I think what we're trying to say is there are a lot of people who their starting conditions would allow them to be risk seeking, but they don't realize it.
Yep.
And that's,
or they realize later and they're like, wow,
yeah,
whoops, like that was dumb.
Yeah. That's a tricky one. You brought up parents. I think it's probably worth revisiting. We're parents.
Yep.
It's hard to not want to have a vision for your kids.
Yeah.
It's hard to not have expectations. It's hard to not have dreams. And maybe they're not like, oh, I want them to be a doctor, right? For some people it is. But it's hard to not have that, right? It's hard to not feel responsible.
Yeah.
But your 20s is really the first moments where your plan's kind of your own. If you're following your parents' plan, you chose that. Like, right? When you're 14, if you're following your parents' plan, maybe your parents chose that.
Yeah.
But when you're 23 and you're following your, like, that's your plan.
Are you living
now.
your own life for the expectations of you?
Yeah.
Because at some point you're going to wake up and
realize this is my plan.
This is my life.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is like, maybe your parents' plan's great. Maybe it's bad. Like, who knows? But, I think there are a lot of people who kind of look back and they're like, oh, I didn't question my plan enough in my 20s.
Yeah.
Like, I woke up in my 30s and was like, wait, did I really like the path that I walked? Did I ever spend a lot of time thinking about did I want that or not? And then they realized in their 30s, like, that's some of that's baked.
Yep. I think the biggest point around these lines is also peers.
Yes.
And who you spend time with. Like,
yes.
I always like to reference, Your personality is just an amalgam of whatever, the 6 or 7 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that we think are our own ideas or our own identity is bullshit. No, it's not. It's just your peer. Like this is, you just soaked it up from your peer group.
Yes.
And so to the extent you're thoughtful about who you're spending time with and asking, are they making me better?
Yeah.
Am I around people that make me more optimistic?
Yeah.
That make me want to do things? That is kind of a big factor into all the life decisions we make. It's funny, think about how much of our lives are dictated by who we get randomly assigned as roommates in college.
Huge.
Like, is there any bigger decision in what
negative
kind of person,
or positive? Yeah.
Yeah, what kind of person you grow up to be
Yeah.
is like random roommate assignments like freshman year.
It's a big deal.
And so this is hackable, kind of like the hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
You could choose to spend more time with different people based on who you want to be more like.
We're not trying to say your friends are bad.
Nope.
What we're trying to say is like, if you want something different, like if you want to change.
If you want to do a startup, having more friends that are startup people that won't be like, startups are dumb, startups are risky, why would you want to do that? And instead of like, oh yeah, I'm doing a startup too. Do you see how that would, like everyone becomes a centrist in whoever they're surrounded by. Yeah. And so if you're surrounded by extremists on any topic, you'll think you're a centrist, but you're actually an extremist.
Yeah.
And so startups aren't weird at all in certain friend groups. And in some friend groups, they don't get it.
Yeah. And it's tricky because it's like, you know, we don't want to make this corporate and transactional. It's just more like, hey, know how powerful those people are around you and like understand a hack to changing your life is changing those people. And hey, changing those people might require changing where you work, changing where you live, moving to a different city. Like one of the nice things about your 20s is you can make big decisions like that, and they usually only impact yourself.
Yep. You can move to a foreign country, you can move to the big city, you can get a job where you don't know anyone, period.
Yeah.
And that's no big deal in the 20s. Everyone's doing that.
And I will tell you this, your really good friendships will survive. Like your really good friendships, you can talk to that person once or twice a year. You can see them once every 3-4 years and they'll stay your friends. So you're not maybe risking as much as you think you are by changing where you live or who you're living with or what industry and what job. You're not changing as much as you think you are. I know it seems scary. Let's move to relationships. Dalton challenged me to offer what I might say is a controversial piece of advice. And one controversial piece of advice I would have is I think you should seek long-term relationships in your 20s. I think a lot of people would say, oh, you don't want to get tied down with a partner and like yada, yada, yada. And I'm not saying like get married, buy houses, have kids. I'm saying I think that there is something really powerful about having a strong partner, especially when you're trying to do hardcore things and you're trying to work really hard and work in maximum effort. I think then having a really good partner actually unlocks some of the gears. I think having someone to come home to that you really enjoy being around kind of recharges you faster. I also think being in the practice of being in stable relationships is good. Mm-hmm. Like it is a good hobby to develop.
That's a
your
hobby.
Future self will enjoy that you like stable relationships. And I think that the opposite hobby can harm, right? Like the person who never wants stable relationships, that just wants to be on Tinder, that like doesn't ever want to be tied down. I'd argue that like
that ghosts everyone.
Constantly. Yes. That's like is trying to do FOMO every minute, right? You're kind of training your body at the wrong lessons. Like if you do aspire to have a family one day, you know, just you can start orienting yourself in that direction in your 20s, or you can like create debt for yourself in the 20s. I'd argue the debt thing is harder. So yeah, that would be my controversial piece of advice. What's left? What are our final pieces of advice for people in their 20s?
Let's rebut ourselves. So Michael, what do you guys know? This is all startup advice.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to start a startup. Why is any of this relevant to me as a person that doesn't want to do a startup that's watching this video?
Well, and I think this is what's interesting is I think that we're not trying to presuppose what you want to do with your life. I think we're kind of trying to say, hey, if you have something tricky you want to accomplish, here's some tricks that can help you. And I think that there's a lot of commonality between the startup founder experience and the experience of someone who wants to do anything that's really hard. I think the scary thing that people don't want to hear is that investments in your 20s pay off for the rest of your life.
Yeah, they don't want to hear that.
Whether they're good or bad investments. Like, and it's like, I think anyone who lived through a childhood where you're kind of told, hey, every door is open to you. It's a world of opportunities. Hates being told, hey, this decade, doors start closing. Like that. Like, no,
let's not feel good, Michael.
No, but it's true. But it's truth, man. It's truth. All right. Other common rebuttal questions.
Oh, well, what if, I have debt or I have to support people? Like, you guys are giving all this advice. This is just not applicable to me. This is not applicable to most people,
So I think that that is certainly true. I think that there are a lot of people out there that have extremely specific limitations. Hell, hey, some people are stuck in a country and they can't get out. I would say, once again, this is not go do a startup. Startups are for everyone. Like, that's not what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is that doing maximum effort is probably the only way you get yourself out of a not great situation. Many not great situations are get outable. Or at least you can ameliorate them, you can make them slightly better if you work really, really hard. One of the things I've noticed is that the people who are the most, I don't know, who have the most challenges, when they can be optimistic and when they can see themselves as agents as opposed to kind of victims, crazy shit can happen in their lives, crazy shit can happen by just switching what's in their head. So you might not be able to apply to YC. You might not be able to move. You might not fine. Yeah. But there's probably something in your life that you can apply one of these lessons to that has a chance of making things a little bit better. I think the last thing that comes up, and this definitely comes in the context of YC, what if I didn't go to a good school? I feel as though the people who went to a good school, they still have a lot of doors open. I'm getting out in the working place and I don't see the doors.
Trying to identify what companies or workplaces have the most interesting people doing the work you're most interested in. Again, even if it's not a tech startup, again, it could be like a magazine or something. But where you're like, wow, this is really good work they're putting out.
Yes.
I would try to get any job there.
Yeah.
Because once you're in the room, once you get into an organization, you will get to meet and be around all these other people and soak up the culture. And there's so many people I know in Silicon Valley that didn't go to a good school, that just got in the door somewhere with any kind of random job.
Yes.
And once they were in there, their intellect and their skills and their abilities allowed them to win people over.
Yeah.
And then they're good.
You're giving subtle advice here because this isn't go get this brand on your resume. This isn't, go get a job at Facebook. This is, where are the super talented people and can you get yourself around them?
Yep.
And what's interesting is that many cases, super talented people aren't at the big companies. Or if they are, they're not at every part of the big company.
Fair.
And so many times super talented people are at the beginning of stuff.
Yeah.
Where getting in is easier.
Well, this is what's funny about smaller startups is they're not famous yet. They are risky.
Yeah.
But you could get hired there. It's not as hard to get hired there as the larger places.
Yeah.
But then you're right in the pit of the craziness when you work in an earlier stage startup.
Yeah. I mean, we had an intern at my startup that went on to get into YC, start a company that's generating tens of millions of dollars in revenue.
Yep.
And did not go to good school. I remember when he was applying for the job, he was working as a security guard for a housing development.
Yep.
That was his job.
How did he get hired at your company?
We wanted someone to be a content moderator, and we were like, what are your qualifications? He's like, well, my qualification is I'm the security guard and I work basically the gate, and it's like a college kind of housing community, and nights and weekends are just crazy. And I'm just like,
You're hired?
It wasn't you're hired. We didn't hire him to be a community director, but it was definitely you're putting your best foot forward, and that sounds hard. Like actually, I've been one of those kids. Like, yeah, like you've done some hard shit. And then what I would say is, man, like getting in the game is as simple as
yeah, because once he got into your startup, then he was hanging out with you guys,
yeah,
like all the founders.
Yeah, it's just you're in the game. You're in the game. And I think this is what's so cool about startups is that, like, man, small startups, you know, they might say, oh, we're looking at people who only went to this school or only got this job. But like, you know, humans are reading every email. Like, you know, there isn't a machine. Like if it's a 20-person startup, 5-person startup, it's like your email got read. And man, when people are in those startups and they're desperate, they're open to giving people opportunities. So to wrap this up, probably the overall TLDR we're trying to share with you is, man, don't be the 30-year-old who wakes up and says, what happened to my 20s again? This is one of those things, like, you know, hard life troops. Life does move.
Yeah.
Years don't come back. And most of the most successful people we know, they were laying that foundation in their 20s. All right. Good chat.
Sounds good. Thanks.